Have you ever wondered why there is such a wealth of ugly architecture, poor urban design, and distasteful art in the world today? Well, I really shouldn't be saying world because they really seem to be exclusive to Western nations. This is a political issue as much as it is a cultural or architectural issue. Schools of architecture in Australia certainly do, and elsewhere in the West probably do as well, only teach a one-sided view of architectural theory. The theories taught to us, which we know more commonly as modernism and postmodernism, come under the umbrella of a greater theory. This theory is at the core of postmodernism in general, and it allows for all of the contradiction in postmodern theories to exist and remain unchallenged, treated sort of dogmatically, if you will. The single theory that I'm about to tell you about is pretty much the core of it all, the thing which binds together the entirety of postmodern theories from all academic endeavours, whether that be modern politics, socialism, neoliberalism, pretty much everyone including the architectural and art community, which is hideously monotonous. So what is this theory called? It's called critical theory. Even though I refer to it as a theory, critical theory, strangely enough, isn't exactly a theory. It's actually more like a method of understanding and critiquing other theories. However, due to the unscientific nature of this method, it has to be branded as a theory in order for it to penetrate into the architectural curriculum. Max Horkheim, the man responsible for coining critical theory, explains it as, and I quote, "a social theory oriented toward critiquing and changing society as a whole, in contrast to traditional theory, oriented only to understanding or explaining it." A great example of the difference between traditional theory and critical theory outside of architecture would be Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations as a traditional theory and Karl Marx's Communist Manifesto as a critical theory. The outcome of understanding and applying both theories in real life has very distinct outcomes. Take, for example, some of the differences between North Korea and South Korea. In the world of architecture, art and design, the outcomes are also very distinct, as we can see here between, apologies for any mispronunciation as well, the Estaco de São Bento railway station located in Porto, Portugal, designed by architect Marques de Silva and artist Jorge Colasso, against the Metro of Naples University station designed by Iraqi artist Karim Rashid. The difference in style is enormous, and the Naples metro station is not considered by any reputable sources to be beautiful in any way, whereas the Estaco de São Bento railway station is often considered to be one of the most beautiful in the world. The key difference here is not that the buildings' positions are different, which they are, one being on the ground and the other being predominantly underneath, but it is to do with the interior space. The artist Jorge Colasso spent 14 years working on the interior art pieces which depict the history of Portugal in the Estaco de São Bento railway station, whereas Karim Rashid spent far less time and used critical theories of design to shape the way he went about the design process. In Karim Rashid's own words, and I quote, "The University of Naples subway station is highly trafficked by a multicultural academic community of thousands of passengers a day. Naples is no longer a historic southern city of Italy, but instead now is an integral intellectual information haven that extends itself throughout the rest of the world. This is the changing Italy, and the station is a metaphor of this new, wide, global condition." Postquote. In order to believe what Karim Rashid says is true, and for this change he speaks of to be good, you must adopt a critical theory mindset. Otherwise, the reality of the situation will interfere with your social dogma, and you might actually end up not liking the new change. Marques de Silva and Jorge Colasso, on the other hand, designed with traditional theories in mind. The difference, once again, like that between Adam Smith and Karl Marx, is enormous. However, the ramifications of these design choices that Rashid has made are still not fully understood, and because there is little debate about them at universities, we are unable to understand the depth of these consequences of these actions from a philosophical perspective. I dare you to debate or even discuss this finding with an architecture professor at university, or one of their students, and see what sort of response you get. Those of you who have tried know well that the response is always from the angle of critical theory. Why are you debating this with me? Clearly you don't understand this theory. Why, don't you realise that critical theory lets us be contradictory and playful with architecture? Unfortunately for socialists, the real world does not operate on critical theories, and they are so out of touch with what the people want that people are more than ever under the impression that art and architecture is just plain ugly. Architects would also struggle to make much of a change from their own monotonous design principles and monotonous culture because they are surrounded constantly by like-minded folk, all of whom suffer from misunderstanding their role in society as an architect. After all, even if an architect did try to make a change, who else would care? I mean, so what if people don't like what we make? Their views are wrong, and so are the polls which show that people are dissatisfied with modern architecture. After all, these are very traditional ways of thinking, not in line with critical theory at all. Although the monotonous culture of the architecture community is not interested in engaging in discourse about critical theory and therefore unable to understand the full consequences of their actions, we do know a few undeniable outcomes. The most substantial being that European people have lost their sense of belonging to their place. If architecture is a practice and traditional styles are part of our culture, then it is pretty obvious that Europeans do not practice their culture, at least architecturally speaking. Minor aesthetic changes, or more importantly, major ones, make a greater disproportional difference in the sense of belonging one has to their place. Not only do aesthetic changes influence this, but the direction and rate of this change do as well. The reason a Pakistani may feel at home in London is not because of the Pakistani community so much, but it's also because of the change they see occurring around them, changing flags, newly built, disfigured postmodern structures, more globalist glass skyscrapers, etc. This very same change is also responsible for the loss of sense of place by the native Europeans. The follow-on effects of this loss are well known: increases in crime and civil unrest, poor mental and physical health, high dependencies on drug use, more single motherhood, abusive relationships, and, if you care, a loss of moral code and local community. Although these new critical theories are producing something substantially different to what was once, stylistically speaking, normal, what it has produced is essentially just a new normal, characterised by ugly colours and shapes and monotonous glass, steel and concrete designs. It has not brought upon a new age of styleless architecture full of freedom and boundlessness, as visionaries have claimed. Instead, all across the Western world, this new style is rapidly dominating and replacing the old unique local styles. If we the people do not criticise the architects, then we deserve to have their designs imposed onto us. This video I'm going to keep short and not delve into an hour-long lecture on the matter. Even though I very well could, as there's a wealth of information on the topic, I've decided to scratch the surface as a way of sort of introducing you to what the culture of practicing architects and architectural education is really like. Thank you for listening, and stay well.